All right. Good morning or afternoon, depending upon what part of the country you're in, or I guess good evening if you are overseas, or maybe you haven't woken up yet. Maybe you're in Hawaii. Doing this special live stream adventure for everybody. I'm going to wait a little bit more to get some additional viewers in here. Good morning, Uncle Pete. How's it going, buddy? We're doing. I'm really looking forward to this. This is actually something very, very fun that came out of a video from another channel called Mr. Meathook, who it looks like is in the chat right now. Mr. Meathook had a video on his channel, which was the top horror film, his favorite horror movie for every year that he was alive, every year since his birth. And I thought that was a fun idea, and I commented on his video that it made me think about my list. And I thought I'd do this as kind of a special presentation, kind of take his challenge, the Mr. Meathook challenge. And I recommend all of you guys to go to his channel and check out that video, and also to come up with your own list, because this is very fun. I'm not going to do every year that I'm alive, because I don't want to go back to the 1930s. So I'm actually doing every year that Mr. Meathook was alive. I'm also doing from 1975 on, which is a lot of horror movies. There's a lot of really great stuff that came out there. And when I took a look at my list of these movies and went back through these eras, I don't think that a lot of my picks are that surprising, although there are a few things in here that I think are a little out of the ordinary. But then I don't think there's anything out there that's insanely shocking to you. And I will start off right away with 1975. And anybody that knows this channel in the slightest bit, I believe knows what I'm going to pick as my favorite horror film of 1975, because not only did 1975 have my favorite horror film, but it also had my favorite film of all time, which is Jaws. So no, not The Reef. So we're going to go start there, and we're going to go all the way up. I think I'm going to stop at 2020, because I don't really think that enough stuff has come out in 2021 yet to really define what my favorite film of the year is. So we'll see when we get there. I don't really know if I've seen that much this year that has really wowed me, but then again, I've been watching a lot of older stuff. So when we go on to the year of 1976, 76 had a little bit more in terms of horror. There was some kind of fun stuff in there that I don't know if necessarily think that I would say would be my favorite. Like Bloodsucking Freaks came out, which is just a lot of fun, silly movie. I was very, very close to pegging God Told Me To, the Larry Cohen film, from that year in there, because it's such a good and bizarre movie. But I did not go with that. King Kong came out that year as well, the remake of it from 76, which is actually a lot of fun, but I don't know if I would put that as my favorite. So my favorite is actually going to be Brian De Palma's Carrie, which is a pretty damn good flick. I know when we did the Stephen King adaptation list, it was almost up at the top. So obviously it's a very well-regarded movie. And Arkham Knight, man, you've got to watch Jaws, man. I don't know if it's going to feel like it's dated or anything like that, but I still feel as if it holds on to being a great flick. So moving on to 1977. 77 was actually one of the hardest movies to come up. Apparently 1977 was the year that Uncle Pete was born, which makes it an even better year. So there was a lot of stuff that I was really, really close to deciding, because there was a lot of things The Car came out there, which is a fun little guilty pleasure of mine. I know a lot of people call it like a terrible movie, but I actually really enjoy The Car. It sticks out to me as being a great flick. Orca came out in 77, which is a great movie. It's probably the best Jaws knockoff in terms of quality. So many good things in there. Eraserhead came out in 77. I don't know whether or not you want to definitively call that a horror movie, but I do. I call that a horror movie. But the number one movie for me of 1977 is Suspiria. It's a gorgeous movie. It may not be the best in terms of story, because if you take a look at the storyline of Suspiria, it's not necessarily a great story, but it is one of the most striking visual movies that you could possibly ever watch. I don't think there's any way to watch the 77 Suspiria and not have it stick in your head afterwards, because it's so gorgeous, so beautifully done that it sticks with me. And I will always throw that on. I have not watched the remake yet, because I've heard it's very good, and I want to watch it, but I just haven't taken it upon me yet to actually jump right in. But I do want to watch it. And yes, John Blues is correct. The soundtrack really helps accentuate those visuals out there. So great. But yes, someone else mentioned The Hills Have Eyes, which I am not a huge fan of. The Hills Have Eyes. I think it's a decent movie, but I actually preferred the remake. I thought the remake was better. Was not crazy about the original Hills Have Eyes. It's all right. It's not a bad movie, but Going on to 1978, we're in 1978 now. 1978, damn, is a hard one to pick through. So many good movies in 1978, starting with some of the minor ones like It Lives Again, which, I love the It's Alive series, and It Lives Again was a great little sequel. And Sarah's here. Hello, Sarah. How are you? Also, Piranha came out in 78. Piranha's great. I love Piranha. How can you not enjoy that? Also, you've got the Invasion of the Body Snatchers remake, which is probably one of the best remakes ever made. Such a great flick. But then it comes down to it. You got two all-time classics, and one of those all-time classics is Halloween, John Carpenter's Halloween, which is a fantastic, amazing movie. And then, yes, Attack of the Killer Tomatoes also came out there. It came out in that year, also great. But I did not pick Halloween as my favorite for that year, because although Halloween is a fantastic movie that I just happen to love very, very much, but my favorite movie from that year is Dawn of the Dead. It's one of my favorite horror movies of all time. It's one of my favorite movies of all time. So between the two, I have to go with Dawn of the Dead over Halloween by a slight margin. I have a little bit of, I guess, nostalgic preference for Dawn of the Dead because I used to work at that mall. I actually worked in the mall that Dawn of the Dead was set in. I hung out at that mall all the time. And being from Pittsburgh, it's kind of there. So I can't not have that be my top for that year. But between it and Halloween, it's a very, very, very close race, but so good. Going on to 1979. 1979 was a little bit easier pick for me, although there was a tough call there. There was, again, quite a few great things that came out in 79. Zombie 2, the Fulci movie Zombie 2, or just Zombie, whichever you want to refer to it as, came out in 79 and is great. It's a really enjoyable zombie flick. I love it a lot. Also in that same year, The Brood came out. Cronenberg's The Brood, which is another great classic flick that's very disturbing. The Brood is very disturbing. But it came down to two for this year. And ultimately, when it came down to favorite, I had to go with one. But Phantasm came out in 1979, which I adore. I love Phantasm. But if I have to go with favorite, it was a very narrow margin, but I went with Alien. I had to go with the classic Alien, because I think that in terms of like longevity, it holds up a little bit better than Phantasm. As much as I adore that movie and its visuals and everything about it, Alien I think Alien holds up better today. Like, you can watch Alien and it doesn't feel as dated as Phantasm. Phantasm feels a little bit more dated to me. It's a little bit harder to pick, to not pick apart the clothing and everything like that as well too. But so Alien was there. I mean, it's just such a distinguished film as well too, in terms of like setting up a lot of different imitators and such. 1980 was zero hesitation from me whatsoever, although quite a few things came out in 1980 that were great. John Carpenter's The Fog came out in 80, which is a great flick. Friday the 13th came out in 1980, which is pretty awesome. But I mean, is the original Friday the 13th really the one that is everybody's favorite? No, it's not mine. My favorite of 1980, without any hesitation, because I've got the poster up on the wall back there, is The Shining. It's again one of my favorite flicks of all time. It's such a great movie. Phenomenal film. It's a small masterpiece. I understand. I definitely get that it's different than the book, and I appreciate it for that as well too. But I love The Shining. Can't go wrong there. 1981, another very easy pick for me, but there was some strong competition, because a lot of good things came out in 81 as well too. You've got The Beyond, Fulci's The Beyond, which is a really great flick. Very interesting movie with a lot of interesting things happening in there. I'm not quite sure what everything is going on in The Beyond. It's a movie that doesn't make a ton of sense. I think I need an unanswered questions video for The Beyond, because it's just a lot of stuff that doesn't make sense. You've got Scanners came out in 81. Scanners is so great, and I feel like it's one of those movies that not everyone has seen, but Scanners is very cool. I guess you'd call that a little more sci-fi than you would horror, but I mean, with that head explosion, how is it not horror? American Werewolf in London came out in 1981, which is another fantastic movie. Mr. Mihawk, you just watched The Beyond last night for the very first time. Oh my God. That had to feel good. That had to feel kind of cool. Because it's such an interesting, I would love to see that movie again for the first time and just sit there and be like, wait, what? But, so I'm a little jealous. I'm a little bit jealous of that. But so American Werewolf in London came out, also a great flick, very interesting horror movie as well too. Howling, so many great werewolf movies, but the very clear and obvious choice for 1981 is The Evil Dead. It's again one of my favorite movies of all time. No, American Werewolf is not the pick. It is Evil Dead. Evil Dead trilogy is one of my favorites. I love it. Again, poster up on the wall back there. Christy actually got me these little mini posters up there. I've got Jaws, The Shining, Evil Dead 2, and The Thing up there on the wall. It's all very cool. It's great flicks. Evil Dead will always be a masterpiece. Going on to 1982, again, another very obvious pick, although 82 had so many great movies that were almosts. 82 gave us Basket Case. My Heenan Lauder fans out there know the Basket Case is a great flick and such an interesting, bizarre movie to watch that's just silly and fun. Great movie. Can't go wrong with Basket Case in terms of watching it. You've got Creepshow came out in that year, which is just this nice little mixture of Romero and Stephen King that just blended perfectly and was just so much fun. You've got Poltergeist came out in 82 that was just very interesting and weird movie, because it's like sort of Spielberg, sort of Hooper, maybe not either one of them. Who knows? I don't know. You've got Q that came out in 82. Q is one of those guilty pleasures of mine. It's one of those movies that I really enjoy watching that is maybe not that great, but Q is just a damn fine flick. But the obvious choice for 82, yes, yes, it is The Thing. I don't think that's surprising to anybody. Also, it's probably one of my top 5 films of all time. So just fantastic and great. I love it very much. 1983. Some less big tentpole, like groundbreaking movies came out this year, but there was still some really cool stuff. Sleepaway Camp was a great movie. Very interesting movie with one of the best twist endings of all time. I don't want to talk about it here because I don't want to spoil it in case somebody in the chat has not seen it. But if you haven't seen Sleepaway Camp, you really ought to. It's a great flick, but it wasn't my favorite of the year. Nor was Christine, which is another great movie from that year. I love John Carpenter. I love me some classic Stephen King. And as I've said before, I think that Christine is a perfect mixture of both of those things. But my favorite movie of that year, I am going to agree with Steven there, and it is Videodrome. Cronenberg's Videodrome is one of those movies that is way ahead of its time. It is prophetic in what it was talking about and with what the video age would become and how people would become sway to it and how it would become its own reality. And it is just a fantastic movie. And it is a movie that is open to a lot of different interpretations. It's a movie that is open to a lot of different reads on it. And I just adore it. It probably is one that I would like to cover in unanswered questions at some particular point, because there's a lot happening in that movie that is questionable and interesting. And it's maybe one of the only times I've really enjoyed James Woods. So there you go. Going on to 1984. This one I'm probably going to get a little bit of flack from. But there was so many great things in 84. So many great things. Starting with Chud, Cannibalistic Humanoid Underground Dwellers. Fantastic, fun flick. Love me some Chud. Toxic Avenger came out in 1984. I really, really close to making Toxic Avenger my pick here because Toxie is one of my favorites. Great hero. Love that movie very much. And also, Nightmare on Elm Street came out in 1984, and that is a great movie and hard to top. And it's such a great horror film, and it's one of the defining moments of Wes Craven's whole career. And it's a great flick, and it's hard to beat unless you're Gremlins. And Gremlins beats it for me because Gremlins, I don't know, I guess it's debatable whether or not you want to call it a strictly horror film, but it is. I call it. It's definitely a horror comedy, and I love Gremlins more than I like most movies. Gremlins is just so much fun. It's frightening. I mean, it frightened the crap out of me when I was a little kid. I know I was afraid of Gremlins, and it's terrifying to me at times, but not so much. But Gremlins also has a pretty distinct point in history of also being the movie that created PG-13. I mean, adults were really upset about Gremlins at the time because of how violent and over the top it was. But there you go. So Gremlins is my 1984 pick. So going on to 1985. 1985, probably one of the big tent poles of horror year. So many great things came out in 85. This was a very, very hard one to pick. Very hard one to pick. You've got Demons. Ugh, I love Demons. Demons is probably one of the more underrated ones here that is just so much fun. It has that fun Italian aspect to it. It's just crazy. It's sort of zombies, sort of not. I love everything about it. You've got Fright Night, another great movie that I have not yet covered in any way, shape, or form on the channel, and so that's going to have to happen in the future. You've got Day of the Dead, which was probably not as good as Dawn of the Dead in my opinion, but excellent movie. So very, very good stuff. You've got Reanimator, another movie that I have not covered on this channel. I've got to do that Reanimator timeline at some point here. All of these are great flicks, but the real answer for favorite movie of 1985. If you want to know it, you have to answer this question. And the question is, do you want to party? Because it's party time, and it's Return of the Living Dead. Come on, how is that not the best movie of that year? And I love it. I love Return of the Living Dead. I don't think that there's any way that you could not enjoy that movie. It is a defining little bit. It's sort of a sequel, but not necessarily a sequel. It's sort of in that Romero universe and also not. And I just happen to adore it. It doesn't feel like anything else. It's the first time that America saw running zombies. I mean, there had been some Italian running zombies before then, but America got their first running zombies with Return of the Living Dead. And it's such a great movie. Big impact. Love it. Going on in 1986. 1986 had some other great stuff in there. Some great stuff in 1986 that really appreciated, although a little bit less than normal. The Fly came out in 1986, which is a great movie. It's, again, one of the best remakes of all time. Such a fantastic movie, the way that Cronenberg took that source material and expanded upon it. The Fly remake feels like the original Fly, but it's something entirely different at the same time. So I thought it was great. Dan is here. Welcome to Four Mood Groups. Dan, how's it going, buddy? So you got to appreciate that Critters came out in 1986, and I will always have a soft spot in my heart for Critters. Such a fun, silly movie that is just really enjoyable. But my favorite movie of 1986, and this was a tough one to put ahead of The Fly. My favorite movie of 1986, before I sit down and watch a movie, you want that movie to thrill you. And the movie that says thrill me is Night of the Creeps, which is just a phenomenal flick. I love it so much. I don't know how you could not love Night of the Creeps. It has this such fun flavor to it. It's a perfect throwback to the 1950s, that classic stuff, those alien invasion flicks, but then put this whole modern twist on it. It's just such a great movie. Night of the Creeps will always go down in my heart as being one of those movies that doesn't get as much appreciation as it should. I feel like a lot of people do love Night of the Creeps, but not. I don't feel as if it gets the fanfare that it really should, because it's a classic. It's great. It's such a great movie. There's people in it that are screaming like banshees. Then we go on to the big one. This was the toughest year of all, which was 1987. 1987 is, God, so this was the big year. Let me tell you what came out in 1987 that almost made my cut. First of all, you got Prince of Darkness, which I talked about quite a bit recently. And I love Prince of Darkness. It's a great flick. I feel it is one of the underrated Carpenter movies. There's so much exciting happening in it. But maybe not one of his better entries, but it was almost up there. You've got The Lost Boys came out in 87, which was, love it or hate it, it redefined vampires for a whole new generation. I mean, it was like the vampire movie of the era. You've got Near Dark, which was the anti-Lost Boys. If you hated what Lost Boys did to vampires, you had Near Dark to kind of counteract that. Great movie as well, too. You've got The Monster Squad, which so much fun. I mean, you could take those classic Universal monsters, update them, and put them up against a bunch of kids. What a great idea that was. Love The Monster Squad. Then you got Nightmare on Elm Street 3, which basically redefined that entire franchise and arguably was like, a lot of people say it was their favorite of the series and made Freddy what everyone thinks of Freddy as being. Great flick, not my favorite though. You've also got Bad Taste, introducing Peter Jackson to the world, and probably one of the best examples of a backyard horror film ever made. Fantastic movie. If you haven't seen Bad Taste, enjoy it for the crazy, sick ride that it is. Then you've got Hellraiser. Hellraiser, one of the weirdest, interesting S&M horror goth kind of things out there. Amazing flick, but not my favorite, because my favorite And I think this is the first time that I've had a sequel on here. And now I guess Dawn of the Dead you count as a sequel. But my favorite is Evil Dead 2. Evil Dead 2, I think, is actually better than the original. It's a different movie than the original, and I happen to love it very, very much. It gives us the Ash that we all wanted to see. It made Ash the character that we wanted him to love. And fantastic movie. Evil Dead 2 is just a masterpiece of bizarre, silly horror. Oh yeah, Mark Davies pointed out Predator was 87 as well. Predator also a good flick. Excellent. 88, another huge year, another very, very hard year to pick from. 88 gave us Brain Damage. Again, my Heenan Lauder fans know Brain Damage is such a great, great movie. So good. Child's Play. Chucky was introduced to the world in 1988. So great stuff there. Killer Clowns came out in 88. One of my favorite silly, I guess, horror comedies. It's a great movie there. Night of the Demons. Oh, such a great, good flick right there as well too. Waxwork. Waxwork came out in 88. You want what monster do you want in your movie? Because they're all in Waxwork. They're there. Pumpkinhead came out in 1988. How many great movies do you have in here? But the number one movie for me, my favorite, is The Blob. Again, great remake, great movie. Takes the original framework, expands upon it, and makes it even better and more interesting. And one of those movies that horrified me and terrified me when I was young. I was deathly afraid of the Blob coming to get me when I was younger. That one was just always stick with me, and because of that, it has to be my favorite for that year. Love, love, love the Blob. Going into 1989, a little bit less to pick from in 89, a little bit thinner field to choose from in 89, but there was some good stuff in there. And my pick, I think, is a little bit controversial, but just because it's one of the lesser known ones. But in 1989, the original Puppet Master came out, which again defined a whole era of Full Moon, and kind of gave us a whole different take on the mini monsters and everything. You also had Shocker, which came out in 89, which is a fun, guilty pleasure, such a silly movie. No, I didn't ignore Pumpkinhead. I said Pumpkinhead. Pumpkinhead came out in 88. I mentioned it, but it wasn't my favorite, but I love Pumpkinhead. But yeah, so Shocker, my constant joke with Shocker is if you don't like Shocker, if you put Shocker on and you don't like it, just wait a little while because in 20 minutes, it'll be a completely different movie. Love Shocker. But my favorite movie, my favorite horror movie of 1989, and again, I guess it's debatable whether or not you want to call it a horror movie, but it's a horror movie, is the Japanese Tetsuo the Iron Man, which is a movie that will probably give you nightmares. It's a very creepy, disturbing movie just because of the way that it's shot. It's black and white. There's a lot of stop motion animation in it. Very odd things, metal underneath people's skins and growing out of from people's skins, and just very disturbing flick. And I love it. I could watch that quite a bit. Very good flick. So now we go into the weird era of the 90s. The 90s, not the best time for horror. But in 1990, we did have a lot of good horror. In 1990, it was just kind of, I guess, the tacking on. A lot of them were sequels. For instance, we had Child's Play 2, which arguably was the best Child's Play movie. We've got Gremlins 2, which I love very, very much. We've got Troll 2, one of the best terrible movies that you'll ever see in your life. Great movie. You've got Night of the Living Dead 1990, a remake in there, another great flick. You've got Exorcist 3, which Exorcist 3 is amazing, such a great flick. You've got Frankenhooker, which, again, I know I'm mentioning a lot of Heenan Lauder on here because he's great. Frankenhooker is so much fun, and it's a blast of a movie. But number one, 1990, was an easy pick for me, and it's Tremors. It's great movie. So much fun. Can't go wrong there. 1991, not a whole lot came out, and the only choice is the movie that really stuck in my head for a long time, and it's Silence of the Lambs. I love. That's a great flick. It's such a great. You could. I know that the makers of the film wanted you to not know that it was horror, but it is a horror movie, and it swept the Oscars that year. It's a great movie. Can't go wrong with Silence of the Lambs. 1992 was one of the hardest decisions that I had to make because I was really torn. There was 3 movies that came out in 1992 that were all great. Love all 3 of these movies, and it came very, very close to it. Army of Darkness came out in 1992, which, again, as I've tagged the first 2 Evil Dead movies as my favorite of that year, Army of Darkness was very close to being on there. Great movie. Again, I think it's the least horror of the trilogy, which I think is what made it not make the top of my list on here. You had Candyman that came out in 1992, which, here's an interesting fact. I never liked Candyman when I was younger. I saw it quite a few times back in the 90s, and I didn't really care for it. And the more I have seen it over time, when I watched it to do my timeline a couple years back, I watched it, I was just like, whoa, how did I not like it? This movie's fantastic. How did I not like this? And now I am just bowled over, and it is a great movie. But 1992, for me, is all about Peter Jackson with either Dead Alive or Brain Dead, whatever you want to refer to it as. But that is probably one of the most interesting, fun, and silly zombie movies that you could possibly pick. It has an overwhelming amount of blood in it, and it is a great flick. So 1992 easily goes to Dead Alive for there. But all three of those movies could easily be my pick. 1993. Hardly anything interesting came out. There was very, very few things to pick from in 1993. And I was very, very torn because the roster of movies was just disappointing. I mean, you had, there was an Amityville sequel in there. I mean, Body Bags was in there, but I don't love Body Bags. It's fun, but it's not that great of a movie. Carnosaur came out. There just wasn't anything in there that really had impact. I know Leprechaun came out that year, but again, not like a great movie that would have an impact. But one stuck out as being a great film to me that was just like, oh yeah, that's my favorite. And that is the movie that launched Guillermo del Toro here, which is Cronos, which is a great flick, a lot of fun, very enjoyable, an interesting movie. Sort of a bizarre take on vampirism, but very interesting. So I would recommend, if you haven't seen Cronos, check it out. It's an excellent movie. Going on to 1994, here's another one that I was very, very torn because there was 2 movies that stuck out to me as being obvious picks. And the first one was In the Mouth of Madness, which is just a phenomenal John Carpenter film. Great movie that I enjoy very, very much. As being a fan of Carpenter and a fan of Lovecraft, again, I think I said it with Christine, one of the most interesting things I think that Carpenter does is he's able to put his own style and the style of the person he's adapting together, and it's a great movie, but it wasn't the one I picked for my number one, and this one might be controversial, but my number one is a movie that I find to be fascinating, and it's a movie that I could watch over and over and over again. And it was released here in 1994 as Cemetery Man, but I know it more by the Italian name of Della Morte, Dell'Amore. And it is a movie that is just a weird poem in film form. It's a movie that you could analyze over and over and over again. I have many, many theories about what the movie is about, but oh my God, do I love it so much. It's such an interesting movie with interesting characters. Francesco and Nagi are both very interesting characters that I want to know more about and get their backstories and everything. I would have loved to have seen more of those characters. Great movie. If you haven't seen it, Cemetery Man is the American version, which is I think it's about 5 or 6 seconds shorter than the Italian version, so it's almost the same exact movie. But a great movie that I saw in the theaters when it was released here and loved it very much. 1995 had two very cool movies that came out. Again, 1995 was a very sparse year, so it was kind of hard to pick from here. There was a couple that stuck out, like Lord of Illusions. I thought was very interesting. Tales from the Hood was a lot of fun and a great flick. But I will say that the one that stuck out for me was Tales from the Crypt, Demon Knight, which was a great movie, very enjoyable flick. But not much happened in 95. Not much happened in a lot of the 90s. 1996, again, not a ton came out. Not a whole lot here, but there was one movie that was very obvious. And I think if anybody knows their years of horror, I think that it's kind of the movie that, for better or worse, redefined horror in the 90s, which was Scream, which I think it is still a great, for me, it holds up. I think it's a great film. I think that it's one of the few movies that had those, that murder mystery stuff that swung around as being, surprising. I was not expecting that ending of Scream. I kind of had my suspicions, and I thought as a murder mystery, it was genuinely surprising, and I loved it very much. I still like Scream. I am not really happy with what Scream did to the world of horror afterwards, because I feel like all of the Scream knockoffs and imitators were done really poorly. But what can you do? 97, hardly anything came out. This was a very, very sparse year for horror in 1997. There was very few things that were exciting to pick from. I mean, unless you like Alien Resurrection, which I do not. Unless you like American Werewolf in Paris, which I do not. I mean, Anaconda. I mean, these were the things to pick from in there, which there's just was nothing that exciting. I know that some people are probably going to say Event Horizon, but I don't like Event Horizon like at all. So that one, I could not pick it. I mean, I think it's an interesting movie, but I don't care for it. So for me, it came down to Cube, which Cube is a great flick. A very interesting movie. I think that I think Cube is brought down by its last 5 minutes or so. But other than that, it's great. I think the last 5 minutes, it really drops the ball in being terrible, because it has a plot twist that makes zero sense whatsoever. So that kind of ruins the movie for me. Not overall, but it's still a really good movie. But interesting. And yeah, Dan, Scream Knockoffs video, you can expect that in the future. Absolutely. For sure. 1998, again, not a ton to choose from. There was just not a lot happening in 1998. You did have Blade, which was fun. Again, not totally sure if you're calling that a horror movie, but it is. Bride of Chucky, which was a fun sequel, good follow-up. Deep Rising, which is a fun, silly thing. But the one movie that really stuck with me as being a really terrifying movie is Ringu, the Japanese original Ring. Great movie. Very interesting. I will say it's funny because here's a story about watching Ringu is when I first saw it, rented it, everyone had talked about how it was this terrifying movie. And I watched it, and I'm like watching like the whole movie. I'm just like, I mean, this is pretty good, but it's really that scary? It's not that scary. And then like that ending happened, and I was like climbing up the wall, like, that's good. So very good stuff. So Ringu, if you haven't watched it, thumbs up for that year there. 1999 was a year that I was a little bit split with because there was not a ton that came out that was really stuck out as being a good movie, as being impactful or interesting. So, you had Bats. You had Camp Blood that came out. Thank goodness for that. Thank you, Camp Blood, for coming out in 1999. So just not a whole lot out there. But the two that I was kind of torn with, the first one that came out that I wanted to go with was obviously Blair Witch, because it's a movie that really defined that era, and it set off a whole new thing. And I know that, like, it's kind of tough to look back at Blair Witch and watch it now and really understand the era of when it came out, and how it came out and everything. And I definitely think that like it was a phenomenon, and um, it was an experience more so than it was a movie. As a movie itself, I don't know if it really works, but as a phenomenon, as an experience, I'm convincing myself that what I'm seeing is real. It totally works, and I love it for that. But it's not my favorite movie that year. My favorite movie that year is the movie that still sticks in my head as disturbing me, and it's Audition. Audition is just freaking terrifying, and it's God, such a creepy movie with a creepy character. The disturbing. I just have to go like that, and you know what I'm talking about. And if you've seen it, and it's just upsetting. And because of that, is my favorite movie. It's not one that I rewatch very frequently, but it's a great flick. So if you haven't seen Audition, check it out. Going into 2000 started to have a little bit more options as well too. Couple of interesting things in there. Ginger Snaps was close to being the pick because Ginger Snaps is great. Such an interesting movie with a cool social commentary happening in it that's not like in your face social commentary. It's subtle. You can appreciate the movie without even getting into all of that. Great movie as well too. Not my number one. American Psycho was very close as well too. American Psycho was one that when I watched it the first time, I hated it. And I don't know how I hated it, but after time, I did enjoy it more. But my favorite movie from that year might be a little bit controversial because it is a little bit silly, and I guess it'd be more of a guilty pleasure. But I think it was kind of more spoiled by what came after it. But my pick for 2000 is Final Destination, which taken on its own as its own movie without the sequels, which all just retold the same story over and over and over again. I love Final Destination. Very good, terrifying movie. The notion, the concept of a villain that's not really a villain and it's just the things around you, just really, I thought, worked very, very well. And I saw that in the movie theaters, and I just remember like it being such a very tense feeling. And it's very tough to not watch Final Destination and after seeing it not look around and see things going wrong and be like, oh, things are falling apart here. Okay. Because of Final Destination, my fear of airplanes is even stronger. So good movie. 2001 is one that had some interesting movies. Not a lot that are standard horror, but my number one pick is very interesting, and one that haunts me. But what came out in 2001 that didn't make the list for me was Mulholland Drive, which again, debatable whether or not you want to call it a horror movie. But I'm sorry that scene with the thing behind the dumpster is one of the scariest things you will ever see. Jeepers Creepers came out in 2001, but I don't want to talk about that. Dagon came out in 2001, which was a really interesting movie that was very cool. Again, if you love Lovecraft, it's recorded, it's very interesting. Very interesting. Somebody had said in the chat earlier, they were talking about Dagon and saying about the acting, and the acting does kind of bring that movie down a little bit because it is pretty shoddy. But it's a great flick, really wild ending. But my favorite movie of 2001, oh my God, such a good movie that I don't feel enough people talk about. And it's one that sticks in my head, and there's times where some of those things kind of creep me out. And it's one that Christy really loves as well, too. Christy always talks about it as being one of the scariest movies she's ever seen. And it's a Japanese movie called Kairo, or Pulse. And they made an American version of it called Pulse, and just completely ignored that ever happened. But Kairo is haunting and terrifying to me. The entire concept of what it's about and how the dead and spirits work in that movie and what their goal is, it's really fascinating and just very, very creepy. And it has some of the most understated terror scenes that I've ever seen in my entire life. So if you haven't seen Kairo or Pulse, please check it out because it will stick with you. Great movie. Moving on to 2002, A lot of good stuff in 2002. 2002 was packed with way more stuff than I would have thought. And there was quite a few things in there that I considered. I very strongly considered Ju-on, the original Japanese Grudge. Very strongly considered that. Great movie. I actually considered the American remake of The Ring, which actually I like the American version better. I think that the ending of the Japanese version of The Ring was better. It had more impact, but the overall movie of the American version I thought was actually better. I don't think it aged as well over time. Like, I think if I watch The Ring now, it's not as impactful as it was back then. But it's a good flick. But that wasn't my pick. I also almost went with Dog Soldiers. Such a great movie. Oh my God, is Dog Soldiers cool? It's probably one of my favorite werewolf movies. Bubba Hotep came out in 2002. Bubba Hotep is, oh my God, so good. It's such a weird movie and so fantastic, but it was not my pick. My pick for 2002 is a movie that I feel like was a great mixture of something that I'd seen before, told a new way, which is 28 Days Later. Which is a fantastic movie that redefined zombie movies into sort of not being a zombie movies, but it seems like a zombie movie to me. Such a great movie, great acting, beautifully directed, beautiful cinematography. Everything about 28 Days Later, I think, is fantastic. Let's just ignore the sequel. So then we go on to 2003, which, unlike 2002, hardly had anything going on in it. There really was not a whole lot in there that was great. There was a couple of good things in there, like Freddy vs. Jason, which I enjoyed. I mean, it's fun for what it is. It was there. Willard, which was a really cool movie. I enjoyed Willard with Crispin Glover. Was an interesting remake. I thought it was kind of fun. The Texas Chainsaw remake, which pretty good, but none of those were really stuck out as being that great. So ultimately what it came down to was 2003. My favorite movie of that year was, I don't remember if it's Australian or New Zealand, but it's the Spirit Brothers' first movie, The Undead, which was a fun, stylized zombie movie with aliens in it, and it's very weird and strange, but it's a cool movie, and I really enjoyed it. Interesting movie. So if you haven't seen Undead, recommend that for fun. 2004 was very easy for me. 2004 was very easy. Very, very easy. You had some bigger name things, like you had the American version of The Grudge, which was a cool movie, decent remake, did a pretty good job with what it did. You had Saw, came out in 2004, kind of fun and silly. But 2004 for me, sorry, it's Shaun of the Dead. I know it's not strictly a horror movie; it's horror comedy, but it's a zombie movie, and it's one of my favorite comedies of all time. It's such a fantastic movie, and it's brilliant. Highly recommend Shaun of the Dead, of course. 2005 is another year which was fairly sparse. There wasn't a lot of things that I was really gonna pick there. There was nothing that was like of a big way. It was like the Amityville remake came out, which don't really care. Just nothing really that stood out as being fantastic. The Devil's Rejects came out there as well, which whatever. But for me, the one that I chose there because it is a great movie and probably one of the better scary movies is The Descent, which is a great movie. Very claustrophobic, very creepy, great villains, great characters. Love it very much. Love that. 2006, another year with not a ton of choices. But there was two that actually stood out for me as being a lot of fun and ones that I wanted to go with. And that was not the remake of the Black Christmas. It was not on my list there. But there was two there. The one that almost made it there just because it's so much fun is Slither. Slither is a lot of fun. I mean, it's sort of a remake of Night of the Creeps, but not quite. It's sort of its own thing. But I love Slither, but it wasn't my pick. My pick was Behind the Mask, The Rise of Leslie Vernon, which was such a great movie. I do feel as if the first half of it is better than the second half of it. In terms of like movies that stick out, I feel as if it does kind of slip up a little bit in the second part where it becomes a more straightforward narrative. but I very, very much enjoyed it. Mr. Meat Hook mentioned Hatchet as well. Hatchet was also a lot of fun. It's one I don't think I go back for rewatches, but it's another good choice in there. But Behind the Mask, easily my favorite for that year. 2007 is one that, again, it doesn't have a ton in there. It is great. And thank you, Craig, for enjoying the Dead Last videos. Dead Last are my favorite ones to make. We're actually shooting a new episode of Dead Last this Saturday that Dan, the Four Mood Groups, is going to be a part of. Excited about that. So 2007, there wasn't a ton out there. One that was very, very close for me there. There was a couple in there that I liked very much. Record, or Rec, whatever you want to call it, from Spain. Very great movie. Very interesting and very cool. Very creepy. Great flick. Loved it, but was not up on my favorite there. The Mist, which was another great movie. Really enjoyed it. That ending is one of the biggest sucker punches that I've ever felt. But 2007 is all about one movie for me, and it's a movie that still freaks me the hell out. And I don't even know if it's officially been released yet, but it's the Poughkeepsie Tapes. If you haven't seen the Poughkeepsie Tapes, it is one of the more disturbing movies that I have come across. And holy crap, yeah. It's one of my favorite genres. One of my favorite genres is fake documentaries. And it is one of the better of them. The acting in it is disturbingly realistic at times, and yeah, it messed me up for a while. It's a fun story too. Is that's one of the very first movies that Christy and I watched together. I'm like, yeah, you like scary movies? Let's watch this. Okay, so going on to 2008. 2008 had quite a few interesting ones there. Nothing really that stuck out as being like phenomenal, but there was some pretty cool stuff there. Cloverfield came out in 2008, which was kind of fun. I like Cloverfield. It's an enjoyable movie. Martyrs came out in 2008, which is a very disturbing movie, really creepy. Pontypool came out in 2008, which is, again, very underrated and very cool. I love Pontypool. It's one that I don't feel enough people talk about because it again redefined zombies in a very unique and interesting way. But my favorite of 2008 is one that I've talked about before. I think, and it was in my underrated, in my obscure horror movie ones, is Lake Mungo, which again it's another one of those fake documentaries. And I just, God, I love it. It just really sticks out as being a great movie to me, and it's one that holds up over rewatch. And the thing that really stuck with me with Lake Mungo is the emotional aspect of it. I really cared about the people in that, and that sucker punch of an ending just really just still sticks with me. Love it very much. Moving on to 2009. Oh my God, very, very, very few movies came out in 2009 that were worthy of contention here. This was a hard one to pick from. There was some interesting things in there, like Antichrist, which was a very disturbing movie. But I don't know if I don't know if I could put that down as a favorite movie. I thought it was very interesting and intriguing to watch it. But I don't know if I started to put that as a favorite list for me. So there was just not a whole lot to pick from. And as I looked over the list, I kept coming back to two. And one was The Loved Ones, which was, I think, a New Zealand or Australian horror movie, which was very interesting and weird and creepy, with some weird ups and downs with the characters. And I liked it. But the one I ended up going with 2009, the one I almost went with for 2009 was Doghouse, which was silly and kind of a goofy movie, which sort of, again, a bizarre zombie movie, and that I happen to enjoy for no reason whatsoever. But 2009 is all about Triangle. Triangle is just this bizarre. You could possibly say that it's sci-fi instead of horror, but there's enough horror going on in it that just makes it really stick out. And it is such an interesting movie. The very first time that I ever saw Triangle, I had no idea what it was about. I sat down completely blank. The only information I had about it was the box art, which was the people going up to a big boat. So I did not know what I was getting into. So watching that movie unfold was really interesting and just stuck into my head there. So really great. So check out Triangle if you have not, but don't read anything about it. Just go and watch it. So 2010 had, again, not a ton of options to pick from. This era of horror right here was pretty weak. There just was not a ton happening. And I know this was one where this was a year where I was kind of flipping through like, what do I go with here? Because as I'm looking at this list right now, I mean, Black Swan? And no, thank you. So there was just not much coming up here. So I ended up going with, there was a couple. I ended up going with The Crazies, which was which I thought was a really fun. I guess fun's not the best word, but it was actually a very good remake that kind of took what it was remaking and expanded upon it in an interesting way. And I really liked it. I thought it was pretty good. The other movie from that year that stuck out to me is Rubber, which was fun. I don't know if I'd specifically classify that as a horror movie, but apparently Wikipedia did. So that was up on there. But yeah, I mean, so I'm going to go with The Crazies, although I think on this list, The Crazies might be a little bit lower on my rosters of things that I would consider. But I did really like it. The Crazies is the remake of The Crazies. Very good movie. Enjoyable. We get to 2011. There was definitely some more interesting aspects. We start to kind of get some more interesting things. There was some cool things in 2011 that I liked very much. The first one that I'll mention is Absentia, which was a very cool movie that started the career of Mike Flanagan. It's one of his earliest movies that really stuck out, and I really enjoy it quite a bit. Absentia is shot very low budget. It's actually filmed about 10 minutes away from where I live. Very cool movie. If you haven't seen Absentia, I recommend it. Ending's not as great of a score as the whole rest of the movie, but it's a very creepy and interesting movie. Also, I considered a movie not many people talk about, and I want to talk about on the channel, is Juan of the Dead. Not Dawn of the Dead, not Shaun of the Dead, but Juan of the Dead, which was a movie filmed entirely in Cuba. And it is a zombie movie, and it is very good, very interesting, very poignant. Wanders around a little bit. If it weren't for like a 15 to 20 minute chunk in the middle that just kind of doesn't go anywhere, I think it would be a great movie. But the beginning is fantastic. The ending is great. It just gets a little bit lost in the middle there. But my favorite of 2011, I don't really think that this is that controversial or groundbreaking, but I loved You're Next. I thought it was a great movie, very stylish. I thought it took a lot of what was happening with the home invasion movies of that time. There was a lot of home invasion movies at that particular time frame, and I thought You're Next took those and kind of put an interesting flip-flop on them. Like that very much. Going into 2012 had a ton to pick from. There was a lot to choose from in 2012. And I mean, there was VHS, which was great. I love VHS, a lot of fun. Lovely Molly, which was a very underrated movie that I recommend highly. It's one that just burned in my head there. John Dies at the Ending, which was another fun movie from Coscarelli, and an adaptation of a book that I love as well, too. Great movie. The Battery, which was a fantastic, again, reimagining of a zombie story made for a couple $1,000s. Great movie that I highly recommend. I love that a whole lot. But the clear pick for me for 2012 is the movie that really sticks out as being an interesting horror movie, because again, it's one of those movies that is like, hey, what monster do you want in your movie? We'll take all of them, and it's Cabin in the Woods. So it's a great movie, my favorite of that year. I know a bunch of the guys that actually make it there too, And thank you, AJ, for saying that your 2012 pick is The Complex. It's my favorite movie of that year as well, too. But yeah, if you haven't seen The Complex, you should. It's free on my channel. 2013 was a pretty interesting year. There was not a ton out, but there was definitely a couple of things I had to pick from. One that stuck out for me is Willow Creek, which was the Bobcat Goldthwait directed Bigfoot movie. That was pretty cool. Sort of a take on the Blair Witch concept, but very interesting. Don't know if I'd pick it as my favorite for that year. But also the Evil Dead remake came out that year, which I liked. I enjoyed. I thought it was a lot of fun. Again, I don't know if I'd put it as my favorite that year. But my favorite that year was actually a pretty interesting one. I went with VHS 2 because I actually liked that more than I liked the first one. And man, some of the imagery in that one really stuck out to me as being fantastic. And God, that second story with the cult, God, love that. So just almost every single segment in the second VHS I thought was a slam dunk, and I really, really enjoyed it. So I dug it. Yes, Willow Creek is the second best Bigfoot movie behind Suburban Sasquatch. Suburban Sasquatch is just a All right. Going up there, 2014 had a lot of movies to pick from. I know I'm going to get flack for this one, but there was a lot of really cool stuff for that year that was a little bit interesting and artsier. As Above, So Below came out that year, which was a really cool movie that was very interesting, that I think is better with rewatching, and I like it quite a bit. Creep came out that year, which I thought was really, really great. Another very, very, very low budget movie made. Great character work. I might have picked that as my favorite of the year, although I hate the ending of Creep. I think the ending of Creep is such a cop out, and I just don't care for the ending. But other than that, I really love it. Great movie. Starry Eyes came out that year. So Starry Eyes is a movie that I don't feel enough people talk about, but excellent movie as well too. Love that. But my pick is It Follows, and I know it's probably like roll your eyes. Yeah, it's It Follows. But yeah, I mean, I do like it. I mean, I feel I watched it with kind of lower expectations because everyone had hyped it up, and by that point, by the time I had seen it, everyone had talked about that it was so overrated that when I went to watch it, I was expecting something that was not that great. So when I watched it, I was like, oh, I think this is actually pretty damn good. And the more I rewatch it, the more I appreciate it. So yeah, It Follows my favorite that year. It sticks with me. Getting close to the end here. 2015 had quite a few interesting movies that year. 2015 had quite a few movies that I liked. The Final Girls came out that year, which was such a great movie. And very interesting and fun, and surprisingly emotional. It was like a punch in the gut at times there. Love that. He Never Died was a movie from 2015 that I really, really like. It's one that another one I don't feel enough people talk about, but it's such a good movie. Deathgasm came out, another great movie that I just talked about on the heavy metal horror movie list. It's such a great flick. But my favorite in that movie, again, this might be another one where it's kind of like, yeah, overrated, but it's not. It's The Witch. The Witch is such a great flick. I mean, it's captivating. It's beautiful. It's haunting. Gorgeous movie. I love The Witch. It's not one that I would probably rewatch frequently as a bunch, but yeah, such a great movie. Oh yeah, Faded Dragon here talks about What We Do in the Shadow, and yes, I guess I wouldn't call that horror. Although, I mean, I guess if I'm calling Shaun of the Dead horror, I guess I could have called What We Do in the Shadow. What We Do in the Shadows is one of the funniest movies I've ever seen. It's one of my favorite comedies ever. Great movie. But I went with The Witch. 2016, was such an easy pick for me. There wasn't a ton in there, and I know that The Void was one that really stuck out to me as being like, oh, that was a really cool movie. I like The Void. But it wasn't my favorite. My favorite is the movie that, God, I've only seen one time because I'm afraid to rewatch it because of how I felt about it the first time, and it is Train to Busan. Train to Busan really impacted me in a huge way. I saw it very shortly after, I happened to watch it very shortly after Stella was born. So a movie about a dad and a daughter had a huge impact on me. And the ending of that movie had me just bawling in huge sopping tears. And it is such an impact. And Mr. Meathook, no love for the Greasy Strangler. I have to admit, I hate that film. I hate the Greasy Strangler. That is not one for me. Absolutely not my cup of tea. I put that in the same category as I put Napoleon Dynamite in movies that I don't get. But oh well. 2017, another one that I think is a little bit predictable. I think that this is another one. It's just like, oh yeah, obviously it's that. But I almost went with Happy Death Day because Happy Death Day was a lot of fun, and it is a movie I was not expecting to be that enjoyable, but it was more enjoyable than I really felt, and it was going to be. So I was surprised by it, very pleasantly surprised. But my favorite of the year was Get Out. I think it lived up to the hype. I thought it had the impact that I was looking for. It's very enjoyable, very different. Loved it quite a bit. So Get Out. I mean, it got an Oscar. I can't be mad at that. Going on to 2018. 2018 is a pick that I think is a little unexpected. There was a lot of movies that came out the year that were pretty good. I think I might have wanted to say Hereditary because Hereditary did stick with me quite a bit. Might have wanted to say Annihilation because I thought Annihilation did not get the credit that it deserved for being as good as it was. Annihilation was great. Mandy is another one from that year. Very cool movie, very interesting to watch. I really enjoyed that. But my favorite from that year is actually something that I feel as if I might need to cover in something because it's a movie that I don't feel a lot of people talk about. It's a movie called Possum. Possum is this little slow burn character study horror movie about a guy moving back in with his family and it's with his dad, and it's just, and weird things are happening around him, and oh my God, does it stick with me? The visuals are gorgeous, the acting is phenomenal, and it is so beautiful. The ending surprised me, and when I found out that it was written by the guy that created Garth Marenghi's Dark Place, and then he made Possum, man, it's one of those ones that stuck with me, and I was thinking about it for days afterwards. So yeah, Eric pulled out that it was made by Garth Marenghi. Surprising to find out, because if you ever saw Garth Marenghi's Dark Place, to know that the guy that created that wrote Possum, they do not feel like the same things. Highly recommend that. So moving on to 2019. 2019 had quite a few that I was going to pick in there as well too, because there was quite a few bigger name things in there, a couple of more obvious ones. It was I really liked Us. I thought Us was very interesting. I don't think it held up as well, but I thought it was pretty cool. Midsummer was almost it for me. Midsummer was almost it. I really enjoyed it. I liked it quite a bit, but it didn't peg down on my favorite list. It was very, very, very close. Color Out of Space, also great movie from that year. Really enjoyed it as a Lovecraft fan. It was nice to see a very interesting adaptation of that. But my favorite was Dr. Sleep. And I think because I was not expecting to like Dr. Sleep as much as I did, hearing that the book wasn't that great, I had a little bit lower expectations for it. But when I watched it, I was kind of blown away by it. I was really, really impressed by Dr. Sleep and enjoyed it quite a bit. And finally, 2020. God, I would love to give 2020 a straight up pass. We did a whole episode on the best of 2020, and there really was not much out in that year. I did like The Lighthouse. I don't know if Lighthouse. I guess it's hard to call that horror for me. I guess it kind of is, but and I thought The Lighthouse was pretty fascinating, really enjoyable. But 2020 came down to The Invisible Man for me, which I don't love The Invisible Man, but I guess it was the most enjoyable one that I've seen from that year. I do feel as if, because as John Blues points out, I do feel as if Possessor might. I haven't watched Possessor yet. It's one I keep on putting off. I keep on putting it off. But I do feel as if when I watch that might become my favorite 2020 movie. But I will get on there. And that's it. That's my list. That's those are the top ones that we have there. So I thought there's some not too surprisingly solid, not too surprising in there. What about Psycho Goreman? Psycho Goreman was fun, but I think that came out this year. I think that's 2021, which was great. I love Psycho Goreman. I think that Psycho Goreman made a couple of. I think Psycho Goreman had some bad choices in it, but overall it was really enjoyable, a lot of fun. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed my list. I would like to know what you guys have as your lists. I mean, this kind of thing was very interesting to me. I'm very thankful for Mr. Meathook for coming up with this idea. And again, if you missed it earlier, you guys got to go check out this. The concept of this originated from Mr. Meathook, who has a channel here on YouTube, and he did a video about this same topic, and I thought it would be kind of fun. So I would check it out and check out his video on that. And then I want to know what your own lists is. I mean, if you feel so inclined, you can email them to me at the Movie Timelines guy. Go for it. Thoughts on the Vinegar Syndrome Blu-rays? I'm so happy that the Vinegar Syndrome is putting out some of these classic movies that have not been given a shot. I am completely digital. I don't watch Blu-rays because I don't have any physical media. I watch all streaming or. Just streaming, or I just buy them from buy digital copies online or whatever. So I don't necessarily get the Blu-ray aspect, but I love that they're putting out versions of these for me to finally see. You can start on any year that you want. Mr. Meathook started his with the year that he was born, which was 1975. I liked that, as I thought those seemed like a good starting year to go with. So I went and I just did that. I just for the sake of having a nice round number, I went on there. But I'm kind of glad you guys went and came on board with this. I thought this was a lot of fun to do. We've got some good stuff coming your way. There's a fun timeline coming your way on Friday. We've got a mini timeline that was picked by YouTube. Via votes that's coming to you on Monday. There's a mega dead last coming in a couple weeks. Yes, I don't want you to know how old I am. That is actually the specific reason why I did not do it from the year that I was born in there, because I was born in like 1923 or something like that. So would like to go on there. If you do want to have a solid list, Wikipedia does have a if you just type in horror movies from the year blank, Wikipedia has a list of all the horror movies that were released in that year. So that's what I used. I'm sure that it's not 100% accurate. I'm sure there's some fun, like low budget stuff that obviously that they haven't thrown in there, but I thought it was a good basis to start from in terms of research and having something to follow up with. So if you want it there, on there too. KH wants to know if there's any Monster Brawl type stuff. I would love to do more Monster Brawl, but unfortunately, it did not get much in the way of views. It just doesn't get much in the way of views. So I kind of have to I have to acknowledge that people don't. It wasn't as well received as I would love. I love making Monster Brawl, and I probably will make more Monster Brawl in the future. I probably will do it, but because it was not as chosen in there for views, and it was not as viewed as I would have liked. It seems as if people just were not that crazy about it. So ultimately, I guess I have to acknowledge that that it was not a huge success. So I don't know if there will be more, but I would like to do more. You will be seeing some more Crypt Keeper in the near future. The Crypt Keeper who appeared in the Dead Last anthology, he is making a comeback to reappear Very excited about him coming back. I've gotten some of the old Dead Last guys are coming back finally because of time and effort. I might even be able to get Christy back to in the near future because I think she's going to have some time for some stuff. So we're going to see. I think she'll be able to come back in there. But thank you guys for liking Monster Brawl. I'm glad you like it. I spent a weird amount of time on that and coming up with those characters and throwing that out there. And yes, Mr. Meathook, you do got to get down into the last. You gotta send some rankings and stuff. We gotta get in on there. But yeah, anytime that Christy's on, I'm happy. I'm trying to get her on. We're doing an episode in October that I wanted her to be a part of because it's not as many movies as normal, so I think she'll be able to watch them. Mikey, I think Mikey's going to be coming back in the near future. Now that his schedule's softened up a little bit, be able to get him back on board. Derek is absolutely coming back. So he'll be back. Derek had a baby, so that took him out of the game for a little while, but he'll be back in the very next episode. I know he was back on the season finale. He'll be back for quite a few. I love Derek being on episodes. He's a great voice to have, and he's a lot of fun. So. And we'll be doing some more. I don't know if you guys have noticed lately, but I've been trying to be a little bit more experimental with what we're doing in the openings and closings and everything like that. Instead of just me sitting in a chair trying to do some different stuff. So I'm keeping on to try to do that. I mean, went out to the Rocks and did the Sword and Sorcery thing, which I thought was fun, and my Riddick thing was kind of silly and fun. This Friday. For the video on Friday, you're going to see some cool effects and stuff like that, and me doing it and everything. So, trying to work some new fun things in there. But yeah, so hopefully you'll enjoy what's coming. And I appreciate you guys for stopping on and being a part of this. And yeah, if you want to send me your list, I'd like to know what your guys' favorites were as well too. We'll do some more streams in the near future. But thank you guys, and see you very shortly. Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.